The interrogation chamber hummed with the low thrum of containment fields, casting pale blue light across sterile walls. Jiggy paced before the reinforced glass partition, her silver fur bristling with frustration. Her amber eyes, sharp enough to count a prey's heartbeat from across a canyon, fixed on the human seated calmly on the other side. Alex. 3 full cycles she'd been assigned to break him, and the human remained as unshakable as a mountain. It was insulting, degrading even. The Karvesh Empire had conquered 17 star systems. Their warrior caste, of which Jiggy was a decorated member, had never met an opponent they couldn't dominate. Humans were supposed to be soft, fragile creatures from a backwater planet who'd stumbled into faster-than-light travel barely 2 generations ago. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. Their homeworld was a death trap of predators that should have eliminated them in their infancy. Yet here sat Alex, day after day, meeting her gaze without flinching. "You understand your situation grows worse," Jiggy said, her translator rendering her growls into flat, emotionless human speech. "The fleet commander loses patience. If you don't provide intelligence on human defensive positions, your value expires." Alex leaned back in his chair, a posture that should have been impossible given the stress inhibitors pumping through the room's atmosphere. Those chemicals could make a Karvesh warrior whimper within minutes. "I've told you, Jiggy, I'm a civilian xenobiologist. I don't know military secrets." "Lies," she slammed her clawed hand against the glass. It didn't crack, it was designed to withstand her full strength, but the sound reverberated like thunder. "Every human is part of your species' defense network. Your minds are linked through your primitive data systems." "You mean the internet?" Alex actually smiled. "That's not quite how it works." That smile, that infuriating human expression that showed teeth without threat, that crinkled the corners of eyes without squinting for combat focus. Jiggy had studied human biology extensively since the war began. She knew their expressions, their body language, their physiological tells. She knew Alex was afraid. The sensors confirmed elevated cortisol levels, increased heart rate, irregular sleep patterns. But he never showed it. "Tomorrow," Jiggy said, her voice dropping to a predatory rumble, "I escalate to physical persuasion. Your species' pain tolerance is documented as remarkably low. You will break." "Maybe," Alex said quietly, "but not today." The next morning, Jiggy entered the chamber to find Alex already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor in some form of meditation. She disabled the sleeping platform the previous night, a minor cruelty to deprive him of rest. He should have been exhausted, disoriented. Instead, he opened his eyes and nodded at her. "Good morning." "There is nothing good about it," Jiggy snarled. She activated the neural disruptor, a device that sent cascading waves of discomfort through the nervous system. Not quite pain, but close enough to shatter concentration and will. Alex's jaw clenched, sweat beaded on his forehead, his hands trembled. But he didn't scream, didn't beg. He breathed slowly, deliberately, and when she finally deactivated the device after a full minute, twice the recommended duration, he looked up at her with those strange, defiant eyes. "Why?" The word escaped her before she could stop it. "Why do you endure this?" Alex took several breaths before answering. "Because if I break, you'll move on to someone who actually knows something. Someone whose capture could cost lives. I'm buying time." "You're buying suffering. Same thing sometimes." Jiggy's tail lashed behind her. In Karvesh culture, strength was everything. The strong dominated, the weak submitted. This was the natural order that had carried her species across the stars. But humans had a different understanding of strength, one that baffled her tactical mind. They endured. Her people fought with fang and fury. Humans fought with persistence, stubbornness, an absolutely irrational refusal to acknowledge when they were beaten. "Your species is insane," she muttered. "We prefer resilient," Alex said, and that damned smile flickered across his face again. On the 5th cycle, Jiggy received new orders. The fleet was moving to engage the human defensive line at the Kepler Junction. Her interrogation was deemed unsuccessful. Alex would be transferred to a prison colony, and she would be reassigned. She should have felt relief. Instead, something uncomfortable twisted in her chest, an emotion she didn't have words for in her own language. She found herself entering the interrogation chamber during her off-duty hours. Alex looked up in surprise. Their sessions were always scheduled. "You're being transferred," Jiggy said without preamble. "Prison colony, Epsilon Tertius." Alex's face went carefully neutral. Epsilon Tertius was notorious, a frozen hellworld where prisoners worked in subterranean mines until their bodies gave out. Average survival, 3 standard years. I see, he said quietly. Jiggy's claws flexed. I requested transfer denial, claimed you still had intelligence value. Why would you do that? Why indeed? She paced before the glass, her predatory instincts warring with something else, something that had grown over these cycles of conversation and confrontation. You're an opponent worthy of respect, she said finally. To waste you in mines is inefficient. I think, Alex said slowly, that might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Despite herself, Jiggy's muzzle pulled back in what another human might have recognized as a smile. Don't misunderstand, I still consider your species inferior. Of course, wouldn't want to ruin your reputation. They sat in silence for a moment, predator and prey, warrior and scholar, two beings from opposite sides of a war neither had chosen. Can I ask you something? Alex said. As someone who's spent a lot of time studying alien species, what scares the Karvesh about humanity, really? Jiggy's ears flattened against her skull. It was a question that struck closer to truth than he could know. You don't submit, she said finally. We've conquered species stronger, faster, more technologically advanced. They all submitted when they recognized superior force. But humans, she shook her head. Humans lose battle after battle, ship after ship, colony after colony, and you never stop coming. You adapt, you endure, you turn your weaknesses into weapons. Like, Alex prompted. Your fragility, we hesitated to use certain weapons thinking you'd shatter. Instead, you built medical technology that can rebuild a body from catastrophic damage. Your short lifespans, you should be cautious, conservative. Instead, you're reckless, throwing yourselves into danger because you have only one life to live. Your lack of natural weapons made you inventors, engineers, creators of tools we never imagined. Jiggy's voice had taken on an edge of something that might have been fear. You're predators who evolved as prey, and that makes you more dangerous than anything we've encountered. Alex was quiet for a long moment. For what it's worth, he said finally, I don't think you're the monster you pretend to be, Jiggy. Sentiment is weakness. Or strength you don't recognize yet. The transfer was delayed, then delayed again. Jiggy's requests for continued interrogation were approved, though she suspected her superiors simply didn't want to admit the failure of reassigning her. The sessions changed. They still maintained the pretense of interrogation, but increasingly they became something else, conversations, debates. Alex told her about Earth, about human history, about species that evolved and thrived and went extinct in the blink of cosmic time. Jiggy found herself sharing Karvesh philosophy, their warrior traditions, the poetry of the hunt that her people had carried to the stars. We're not so different, Alex said one day. We are utterly different, Jiggy countered. You pursue knowledge, we pursue dominance. And yet here you are, pursuing knowledge by talking to me instead of hurting me. She had no response to that. The war turned. Human forces, employing tactics that defied conventional military logic, began pushing the Karvesh fleet back. Jiggy heard whispers in the corridors, fear among warriors who'd never known defeat. The humans were coming. When the station's alarms finally screamed, when human warships dropped out of FTL in a coordinated assault that should have been impossible to plan, Jiggy made a decision that would have seen her executed for treason. She opened Alex's cell. He stared at her in shock. What are you? Escape pod Bay 7 coded for emergency launch. She pressed a data chip into his hand, coordinates for human-controlled space, and intelligence, Karvesh fleet movements, defensive weaknesses. This is treason, they'll kill you. Perhaps I've learned that strength takes many forms. Jiggy met his eyes, those strange, determined human eyes that had refused to break. Go, before I regain my senses. Alex hesitated at the door. Come with me, surrender the humans. We take prisoners, we treat them well. I am Karvesh, we do not surrender. I thought you just said you learned strength takes many forms. She bared her fangs in a genuine smile. Perhaps I'm still learning. Now go, before I change my mind and we both die on this station. Alex made it to the escape pod. Jiggy watched on security feeds as it launched, as human ships provided cover fire, as he disappeared into the safety of his own fleet. When the security teams came for her, she didn't resist. She'd broken the warrior's code, betrayed her oath, chosen mercy over dominance. And yet, as they led her to the brig, Jiggy felt something she'd never experienced before. Pride not in conquest or victory, but in choice, in growth, in recognizing that the human she couldn't break had, instead, broken through her own certainty about the universe. The interrogators would come for her eventually. Perhaps she'd break under their methods, where Alex had not. or perhaps she'd endured enough of his stubborn human resilience to teach her a new way to be strong. Either way, she thought, the wolf girl had learned something more valuable than any military secret. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to break someone else. Epilogue. 3 cycles later, a prisoner exchange was negotiated, the first sign that perhaps the war might end in something other than extinction for one species or the other. Among the Karvesh prisoners returned was a silver-furred warrior, silent and scarred but unbroken. Among the human delegation waiting to receive their own people stood a xenobiologist named Alex, who smiled when he saw a familiar figure among the released captives. Their eyes met across the neutral ground. Neither spoke, but in that moment something passed between them, recognition, respect, and perhaps the first seeds of the understanding that would eventually bring peace between their worlds. The wolf girl nodded once. The human nodded back. And 2 species that had tried to break each other began, finally, to learn. And the